Okay, shalom friends. Welcome to the second lesson of Yackov. And let's get right into it. Yesterday, we mentioned a verse from Psalms 119, Psalm 119. And King David says, he's describing his schedule and what he does every day at midnight. And he says, at midnight, I arise to give thanks to you. Every midnight, he would get up, either from his sleep, like we spoke yesterday in yesterday's lesson, or from his he was dozing off, or from his involvement in learning Torah, whichever way we explained it yesterday, and he would go give thanks to Hashem. And in the verse he says, at midnight, meaning that it was exactly at midnight that he would get up and give thanks to Hashem. He didn't say at about midnight, I would get up and give thanks to Hashem, but at midnight, it was exactly at midnight. So the Gemara is bothered by this. Because the Gemara thinks that Moshe, that King David had this intuition to identify the exact moment of midnight. And therefore the Gemara is bothered by this. Because the Gemara says, even Moshe Rabbeinu, the greatest prophet, did not have this intuition to identify when exactly was midnight. Where do we see that Moshe did not know to identify exactly when was midnight? Because the Torah tells us that regarding the plague of the firstborn, the last plague in Egypt, plague of the firstborn, that all the firstborn Egyptians will die. So when Hashem related to Moshe Rabbeinu about the plague, he told him, at midnight, tomorrow at midnight, I will go out in the midst of Egypt. And this is what you should relate to the Egyptians. And that's what Moshe did. He related this message over to the Egyptians. He says, so said Hashem, but instead of saying the way Hashem said it, the way God said it, at midnight I will go out in the midst of Egypt, he changed it. He said, at about midnight I will go out in the midst of Egypt. He changed it. At about midnight, not at midnight exactly. Why did he change it? He could have just related it the way Hashem said it, because he was worried that if he would say at midnight, then the Egyptians would ask him to prove it. They would challenge it. And he would not have any way to prove it because he didn't have any way of identifying the exact moment of midnight. So in order not to put himself in a position to have to prove himself, and he cannot because he had no way of identifying the exact moment of midnight, so he changed from what the message that Hashem told him, and he said, and he related to the Egyptians, at about midnight, Hashem said he will go out in the midst of Egypt. And therefore they're not going to challenge him, because he said at about midnight. So we see that Moshe Rabbeinu had no way, did not have this intuition of identifying the exact moment of midnight. So if Moshe Rabbeinu, the greatest prophet, didn't have this intuition, so King David did have it. So that's what the Gemara is bothered. So the Gemara explains. We're going to give three answers to this things. It's really two, which is three. Let's see. The first answer the Gemara explains is that it's true. King David did not have this intuition either. Moshe Rabbeinu didn't have it, like we just showed. And King David didn't either have this intuition. But what? So how did he know when exactly was midnight? Because he didn't say at around midnight I got up to give thanks to Hashem. He said at midnight, meaning it was exactly at midnight. So how did he know exactly when it was midnight? So the Gemara says, because he had a harp. It wasn't because of the intuition. He didn't have it. But he had a harp that hung over his bed. And this harp was positioned to the north, with its holes facing the north. And the Gemara says somewhere else that every day at midnight, the northern wind starts to blow. And therefore, the northern wind would come and would blow through the harp, because again, it was positioned to the north. And therefore, it played by itself. And the second, immediately when the King David would hear this, so he would get up, either from his sleep, or from his doziness, or from his studying of Torah, and he would give praise to Hashem. He would involve himself in psalms and giving praise to Hashem until dawn. So that's the first answer. In other words, like we said, that you are right, says the Gemara. King David didn't either have this intuition. But he had the harp to be able to give him exactly when it was midnight and exactly when he needed to get up and involve himself in giving praise to Hashem. A second answer that the Gemara gives is that the truth is Moshe Rabbeinu did have this intuition. In other words, King David had this intuition, yes. But Moshe Rabbeinu also had it. Not like we thought that Moshe Rabbeinu didn't have it. Moshe Rabbeinu also had it. So if so, why did Moshe Rabbeinu say that he? Why did he change from the message that Hashem related to him? Hashem told him at midnight, I will come out. I will go out in the midst of Egypt, exactly at midnight. And he said at around midnight. He told the Egyptians at around midnight. Hashem said that around midnight he's going to come out. Why did he change it? In other words, according to the first answer that we said that Moshe Rabbeinu didn't have this intuition, so we understood why he changed from Hashem's message, because he didn't want to be put into a position of having to prove himself, and he couldn't prove it because he didn't have this intuition to identify the exact moment of midnight. But according to what we're saying now, that Moshe Rabbeinu did have this intuition, so what was the need of changing it? Just say at midnight, and if they're going to challenge you, you'll be able to prove it. So the Gemara says, because Moshe thought that perhaps Pari's astrologers, they might make a mistake in their calculating the moment of midnight. So he would tell them, if he would tell them at midnight, they're going to make a mistake in their calculation, and then they're going to say, even though you were right that Hashem appeared, came in the midst of Egypt, but you were not right, you were a liar, because you said in the midnight and it was not a midnight. It was their miscalculation. And they would say Moshe is a liar. Therefore, although he did know the exact moment, he did not say that the plague would begin at midnight, so they shouldn't call him a liar. Because it's better to claim ignorance than to say something that might be considered false and will lead to a loss of trust. The Gemara says this is what we learn from another tractate called Tractate of Derech Eretz. That over there the sage, the Tana, said that you should teach your tongue to say I don't know. Teach yourself to say I don't know. Be arrogant. And just say I don't know. Sometimes. Why? Because you might misspeak, and then you will become trapped in a falsehood. So it's better to claim ignorance than to say something that might be considered false and will lead to a loss of trust. And that's what Moshe Rabbeinu said. He knew exactly when midnight was. but he said at around midnight. So they shouldn't say, based on their miscalculation, you're a liar, and therefore you're not really a prophet. So that's the second answer. That Moshe Rabbeinu, in other words, what was bothering the Gemara was that 1 second, King David had this, Moshe Rabbeinu didn't have this intuition. King David did have this intuition. So the answer is, Moshe Rabbeinu also had the intuition. Let's just say a point. If King David had this intuition, according to this, so why did he need the harp? In other words, in the first answer we said, so King David didn't have this intuition. So how did he know when was midnight? Because he had the harp. Here we're saying is that King David also had it, and Moshe also had it. So according to this, why did King David need the harp? That was not in order to tell him when exactly was midnight. He had the intuition already, but it was in order to tell him, to remind him that it's midnight, and therefore to get out of his doziness and to change and to get involved in saying praises to Hashem. That's the second answer. A third answer is that it's basically like the second answer, that we were bothered because we said Moshe didn't have this intuition, King David did have this intuition. So just like the second answer, here we're saying is Moshe also had this intuition. Okay? But if so, why did he change from Hashem's message, right? Hashem told him, at midnight, I will be amongst Egypt. And he said that Hashem said, he related to the Egyptians, Hashem said, at around midnight. So Rav Ashi says, no, you misinterpreted the words at around midnight. In the Hebrew it says kachatzois. Now kachatzois, we translated it at around midnight. But it could also be translated like midnight. Kachatzois means like midnight, not around midnight. Meaning Moshe Rabbeinu was telling the Jewish people that it was the day before the plague, and he told them, just like right now is midnight. He related to them a message at midnight, the night before, and he said it. And he told them, like right now is midnight, so too tomorrow at midnight, the same exact hour, like the same hour as tonight, the plague will come. And therefore, of course, but Moshe had this intuition. Of course, he knew exactly when it was the time. That's the answer. So, that's it. Either that both of them didn't have it, or that both of them did have it. Okay. All the best.